Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin with our acknowledgement that we are holding this evening's meeting in the traditional territory of the Wasanic First Nations. I'd now like to call our regular council meeting of Monday, April 8th to order, and we'll begin with public participation. I ask individuals wishing to speak to come to the front, press the little button to get the red light, and give us your name and address.
My name is Susan Samasco. My address is 9837 7th Street. I'm a business owner in Sydney and the current president of the Sydney BIA. I'm here tonight for two reasons. The first is to thank you very much for your decision regarding the mobile vendor of ice cream. We appreciate you respecting the request of the permanent businesses in town that offer gelato and ice cream by limiting the areas in which the mobile vendor can operate. As you know, the summer is our busiest season, and with rents upwards of $5,000 a month for many of our shops, every dollar counts for our small owner-operated permanent businesses, so thank you for that. The second reason I'm here is to clarify that the Startup in Sydney campaign, our short economic development pilot project that the Sydney BIA just completed, was never about attracting mobile businesses or food trucks. The pilot project was about three things, and I'll just list them out for you. The first one was attracting permanent businesses to our downtown core to fill vacancies and to promote that Sydney is open to business and investment. While you'll receive a full report in May of the project, the pilot, I want you to know that to date we've been contacted by 8 entrepreneurs who are now in touch with commercial property owners or realtors about leasing options in Sydney. Those 8 owners include 1 daycare, 3 service sector businesses, 1 retail business, 1 tech business, and 2 food and beverage businesses. We're hopeful that at least some of these will come to fruition. The second arm of the pilot project was creating an online job bank to support our local businesses across the peninsula in their efforts to recruit and hire much needed employees. Thus far, we have 33 businesses using the job bank, including Foreman Machining, the Airport Authority, Harrows, Van Isle Marina, and 29 others. To date, we've posted between 50 and 60 jobs. And this is a free service to local businesses and one that has garnered a lot of support and praise from business owners and managers in all sectors of Sydney. The third arm of our pilot project was to provide a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs or prospective business owners. Phone inquiries have come into and have been professionally handled by Donna Petrie, our executive director, who has served as a conduit to whatever individual needs, whether that's information, advice, phone numbers to realtors, phone numbers to commercial property owners, whatever they need, and somehow even the town's planning department. Again, this aspect of the project has worked extremely well, as you will read in our report. So I just want to thank you again for your decision regarding the mobile ice cream vendor and for enabling me to articulate the purpose and preliminary outcomes of the Startup in Sydney campaign. Please know that if any time any of you have questions, comments, concerns about something the BIA is doing or not doing, please feel free to contact Donna or me at any time. Thank you.
Susan Samasco, thank you for your comments and thank you for the positive news. We look forward to your report on the project in the coming weeks. I'll ask for a second time. Is there anyone wishing to address council this evening? And for a third time? And seeing none, I'll bring public participation to a close. We do have an agenda and we have one change, and that is a request to move item 16.6 from correspondence, raise it to new business. If I could have a motion regarding the agenda.
I move that we can raise item 16.6 to become item 13C.
Discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries unanimous. And item 3, we have adoption of our regular council meeting minutes from March the 25th.
I'll move adoption of those minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll move on to the mayor's report. I have just one item to speak to this evening, and it's with regards to the Ray Creek Pond remediation project. Last week, the town of Sydney received written notification from Transport Canada that the Ray Creek Pond contamination remediation project will not proceed this year. It was only a few weeks ago that Transport Canada advised the town that the funding for the pond remediation was in place. Senior staff exchanged information with Transport Canada, and Transport Canada was confident that the project would commence and complete between June 15th and September 15th this year. At this time, Transport Canada is not able to confirm when the project will proceed, but they have advised that it is their goal to complete the project in the summer-fall of next year. The reason given by Transport Canada for the delay with the project is that there is insufficient time to complete all the necessary preparatory work, which included an environmental approval from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, also known as DFO, and the tendering and award of the project to a private contractor, such that the work could commence near the June 15th start of the DFO work window. Transport Canada further advised the town that they would continue to complete the documents and project specifications this year. However, they cannot yet confirm a revised schedule for construction. While this is disappointing news, there are potential positives in that it will allow sufficient time for two important things. Whether or not to proceed with this fall with community engagement for two important things. One is whether or not the existing dam structure should be retained, and two, determining what additional park improvements might be deemed desirable by the residents. With completion of this community consultation in the fall, it is possible that all of the works could happen concurrently in the summer-fall of next year, 2020. That is, the pond remediation would be done by Transport Canada, the reconstruction of the dam by the town of Sydney, restoration of the area by Transport Canada, and new park landscaping by the town. As a summary for the public, Ray Creek Pond contains high levels of heavy metal contamination, including chromium, cadmium, zinc, and lead. It was determined that these contaminants resulted from upstream industrial activities on the airport property, which was operated by Transport Canada prior to being taken over by the Victoria Airport Authority, and dating back as far as the 1940s. As a result of efforts by the town, a local resident group, the Friends of Ray Creek, and a nonprofit organization, Peninsula Streams, along with other stakeholders, Transport Canada classified Ray Creek Pond as a Class 1 contaminated site with, quote, a high priority for action. The remediation of the pond involves the removal of approximately 340 cubic meters of contaminated sediments. For those who don't drive dump trucks, apparently that's about 350 dump truck loads. The disposal of this material at an appropriate facility, and then significant restoration of the area. Council and staff are committed to community engagement in the fall and the future of the dam component and possible park improvements. We'll provide the public with more information on Transport Canada and the remediation project as it becomes available, likely in the fall as well. Thank you. That concludes my mayor's report. We do have 3 council reports, and I'll begin with Councillor Duncan.
So I guess on April 3rd, we had the first meeting of the CRD's Intermunicipal Task Force, which is kind of a bit of an odd group that I sit on, and Cliff is the alternate, or the mayor is the alternate. Mostly, since it was the inaugural meeting, we were just hearing from the CRD about what they're already doing within their climate action plan. Much of the discussion was centering around, since the CRD has called a climate emergency, and most of the municipalities have called their own as well, where we go from there. So the task force came forward with a couple of motions to send up to the Parks and Environment Committee, which is the actual committee that can that we kind of sit under, that can actually change our terms of reference and things like that to allow us to get additional staff support and meet more frequently. So I guess the things that I can report out, mostly for the public's benefit, things that have to do with CRD grants and things that are still underway, the rest of council has received. But BC Hydro is kind of undergoing they have a rebate program to allow people to convert from oil or natural gas heaters to electric heat pumps. So they have $3,000 available, or up to $3,000 available if you're got an oil tank, and if you're in Victoria or Saanich, they were doing top ups up to 3,700. Sydney, North Saanich are not topping up right now, but if you're thinking to do that, it's a first come first serve for 200 households. Quite a lot of grants have been applied for under the CRD for sea level rise research and ways to get to do more rebate programs like that. So hopefully we'll find out later in the year whether we get more of those. Councillor Zeb King is on the intermunicipal task force, and he wanted to note that Central Saanich has already implemented a very aggressive step code schedule to start meeting the provincial guidelines for reaching a zero emission ready buildings by 2032 is the provincial standard. And we have the step code, which is supposed to allow us to kind of gradually get there and let builders kind of get used to what that will be like. And they've started at step 3. It goes up to step 5. And so they've kind of dropped the gauntlet for us. We also received a presentation from Clean BC, which is, of course, the province's new roadmap, I guess you could say, to getting to lower our emissions. I don't think it quite gets to zero emissions. They have quite a large chunk that they're kind of hoping we'll figure out something to do as we go along and start getting some success with what they've already planned. But if you Google for BC Climate Leadership Plan, you should get it. It's online, so you can take a look. And the existing CRD Climate Action Plan is the CRD Regional Climate Action Plan, and you can look for that as well. So you can see what they're already doing, and hopefully we can start stepping up what we're doing now that we've called the climate emergency.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, I attended the Sydney North Saanich Community Consultative Committee on April 3rd, and what has come out again is the RCMP are really trying to make a real focus on auto theft prevention. It's something that's been on the radar for a long time, and it just doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be sort of we're comfortable in Sydney and we don't think it happens here, and so please, people, lock your cars, take your valuables out. And in tune with that, the no valuable inside stickers, as I mentioned previously, are available at Thrifty, Save On Foods, and Canadian Tire. They're also now available at the Town Hall, and I have some here. So if anybody after wants one, feel free to come up and get one from me. The RCMP will also be hosting a crime prevention open house on June 30th at the Mary Winspear Theatre in the Bodine Hall, and this is to coincide with Sydney Days on the long weekend. So there will probably be some really good information, not just about protecting your home, but also on scam prevention and things that help our citizens. Something that might be worthwhile for everybody to take in, actually. There's some volunteer opportunities available for helping with safety in the community. Citizens on Patrol, which assists the RCMP usually on the weekends. They're looking for volunteers. That involves 4 hours per month, which is basically one shift, because that's what it turns out to be. They're looking for people to do speed watch in the community, and something called cell watches, which is looking for distracted drivers on their cell phones. So if anybody has an interest in any of that, policing or just helping the community in a safety perspective, feel free to contact the local RCMP detachment just across the street over there. And also, on a side note, if anybody out there has any concerns in their neighborhoods with safety, the RCMP can't be everywhere at all times. So feel free to contact me, and I will take it to Staff Sergeant Conley, and they'll look into issues that you might have in your communities that just are not being noticed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. And Councillor O'Keefe.
I have four quick things. So the first one, Memorial Park Society. So I attended their board meeting on Chad's behalf on March 26th. So I gave them an update on the construction of the parking lot. The members of their board had viewed our video, so they were aware of the concerns that had been mentioned in regards to the parking lot. And they'll look forward to meeting with you, Mr. Mayor, and Chad and staff to discuss that further. Also attended Peninsula Celebrations right after that one, and they're looking to boost their brand in the community and give themselves a higher profile. They struggle with the fact that they're doing all of these great events in the community, like the Canada Parade, the Sydney Sparkles, the Family Fun Fair, the Breakfast with Santa, all these good things, but nobody seems to know who they are. So they're looking to get a tent and some vests and sort of make themselves more visible in the community when they do these things. A couple things coming up. They mentioned their Summer Sounds concert series is now confirmed, and they'll announce those particular groups that'll be playing in May. The schedule will be out. And they're also organizing the Easter egg hunt for those with kids at Dominion Brook Park on April 21st at 1 p.m. Another thing that they've started, which was I wasn't aware of, was their Opportunity Fund, which they're using to help fund other events in Sydney. And so I guess a few years ago they had excess funds, and so they thought that they would use that sort of like an in-kind or grant program, so to speak. So this year they provided $1,000 to the Mary Winspear Center for Dinner on Rouge and $1,000 to support the Comic-Con. Third item is Métis Reconciliation Workshop. So this is something that Councillor Duncan and I attended on Friday, which was organized by the Métis Nation of Greater Victoria and hosted by Holy Trinity Anglican Church on West Saanich Road. And it was encouraging to see the steps that the church is making in terms of reconciliation. And so what they're doing with members of local First Nations communities is bringing groups together just to talk, to become educated on the topic. The one good takeaway from that session was a video that they shared, and it's called The Doctrine of Discovery, Stolen Lands and Strong Hearts. And it's an hour long, but I encourage my fellow council members and members of the public to invest an hour to go take a look at it. It provides firsthand stories of Indigenous people and the negative impact of colonial laws and practices. But I think it's a good, I found it, as much as I thought I knew about reconciliation in Canadian history, I found it enlightening and very interesting. So, Doctrine of Discovery, Stolen Lands, and Strong Hearts, if you want to check that out. And my last thing is from the YYJ, the Victoria Airport Noise Committee. And so noise complaints were down significantly from 2017 to 2018. This is a report that runs for the calendar year. So they're down from 84 to 44, with only 4 from Sydney. Don't get too excited though, because the reason they attributed to the decline was the fact that 443 Squadron had started winding down their training exercises as the Sea Kings were being decommissioned, and they're still going through the conversion to their new Cyclones. And the Cyclones, they only have 3 so far. They'll eventually get 9, and all the training for those is taking place back east. So we're not hearing any noise from that. They did say though that once those are out here, we can expect significantly more noise. They're bigger engines than the previous helicopters, so they'll make a lot more noise. That'll be in 2020, and they did what I suggested to them is that they might have a communication strategy when they start ramping up for the Cyclones. I suggested that perhaps they contact the town so we could put something out in our communications, and that they might want to do an interview with Radio Sydney, perhaps, to talk about those. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. We'll now move to committee reports, and the first is the Select Committee to review the EDC, and we have minutes from 2 meetings, March the 7th and March the 14th, 2019.
I'll move that both sets of minutes be received.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. And we have our minutes from Committee of the Whole meeting, April 1st of this year.
Committee recommends, and I so move, that the minutes be received.
Second.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
And there were several recommendations that came out of that meeting. Recommendation 1 is the concept plans for Resthaven, Rathdown, and Breathier Parks. Recommendation 1, that the Rathdown, Resthaven, and Breathier Park concept plans report by Barefoot Consulting, date April 1st, 2019, be received. And 2, that staff analyze potential action items from the concept plans and bring forward potential projects for consideration as part of annual fall strategic plan and subsequent budget processes.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Second recommendation is the development at Fire Hall parking lot lands, request to consider affordable housing proposal at 9837 3rd Street, 2477 Sydney Avenue, and 9821 3rd Street. Committee recommends, and I so move, that council support in principle the affordable rental housing as a component of the project. I'll just take that separately.
Second.
Discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Third recommendation from committee, and I so move, that the developer confirm in writing that the affordable rental housing proposal in no way impacts the timing of the August 1st, 2019 closing date as noted in the contract of purchase and sale.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Committee recommends, I so move, that prior to consideration of the request for town support, 10-year tax exemption for the residential component and waiving of all remaining development-related fees, the developer provide staff with a detailed development pro forma that includes the potential CMHC financing component and a 10-year rental term, and provide details of the criteria for eligibility for the non-market rental units and details of who would be overseeing the eligibility of applicants.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Fifth recommendation, I move that once staff have received sufficient detailed information from the developer, they report back to council with recommendations regarding the developer's request for town support.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
And the sixth recommendation from Committee of the Whole is regarding development variance permit application number DV100281 at 2344 Orchard Avenue, which is to increase lot coverage and reduce interior side setback to retroactively legalize accessory structure. Committee recommends, I so move, that the development variance permit number DV100281 at 2344 Orchard to increase the maximum allowable lot coverage and reduce accessory building setback be denied.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
And the seventh and last recommendation is regarding sign proposal for Artsy Gallery to install new signage and request a variance to allow for a non-permitted sign type to be installed. And the recommendation from committee, and I so move, that the sign proposal for the Artsy Gallery at Talista Park, 9565 5th Street, be referred back to staff for further review.
I'll second that.
And discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Fallon. We'll now move to staff reports. We have two. The first is the Sydney BIA Merchants Sidewalk Sale, a report dated from staff April
8th. I'll move the recommendation that the Sydney Business Improvement Area Society be granted permission to close the following downtown streets on June 30th, 2019 from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the Merchant Sidewalk Sale. 1, Beacon Avenue from 5th to the west side of 1st Street Roundabout. 2, Beacon Avenue from the east side of the 1st Street Roundabout to the Beacon Wharf. 3, 4th Street from Beacon Avenue North to the first driveway access, approximately mid-block. 4, 3rd Street from 9813 South to and including 978. And 5, 2nd Street from Beacon Avenue to 9781 2nd Street. In addition to the above street closures, the SBA is also required to complete the following items. 1, provide proof of $5 million liability insurance, naming third-party insured as the town of Sydney for this event. 2, that the SBA conform to all town bylaws. 3, that the SBIA arrange a meeting with town staff, the fire department, and the RCMP to review safety traffic requirements at least 4 weeks prior to the event. 4, that the SBIA send out notices at least 4 weeks prior to the event to affected residents, businesses advising of the event on June 30th, and provide a contact number should there be any concerns, questions. 5, that the SBIA acquire the necessary event license from the BC Liquor Control Board for the proposed beer garden and provide all necessary security. And 6, that no costs are to be incurred by the town in relation to this event.
Second.
Discussion? I have a question from staff and then a comment. The question is with regards to the closure at the foot of Beacon Avenue. And so it shows the barricade at the large traffic circle east of First and Seaport Place, and that's for the plein air artists, but it shows them further down, closer to Beacon Park. Will there be activities in all the parking spaces between the traffic circle and where plein air are?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. The second comment is, I just see on the map here that the icon that says live stage at 4th Street is shown right at the intersection there. And just from previous experience, a suggestion whether we just mention it to staff or do a friendly amendment is that it not be in the crosswalk at 4th Street, which has happened in the past.
We'll note that.
Very good.
Look at that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And our second staff report is regards to dinner on Rouge in Beacon Park. Report from staff dated April 8th.
I'll move the recommendation that council approve the following. 1, the closure of Beacon Avenue from the easterly roundabout to the wharf from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on June 29th. And 2, that alcohol be permitted to be served in Beacon Park for the dinner on Rouge on June 29th. Subject to the following conditions. A, that the event organizers hold a meeting with emergency services and the town's public works to coordinate at least 4 weeks prior to the event. B, that the businesses on the Beacon Wharf be given 30 days advance notice of the road closure. C, that the event organizers provide the town with $5 million proof of liability insurance coverage that also names the town as an additional insured. D, that the organizers acquire a special occasional liquor license for the consumption of wine in Beacon Park. And E, that no costs are to be incurred by the town.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll now move to item 13. We have 2 items of correspondence. The first is technology renewal update, a letter from Crest dated March 26th.
I'll move receipt of the letter for information.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor?
Sorry, I beg your pardon,
No,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Toole?
I guess I'd like to just gauge council's appetite for taking up Crest on the suggestion here that they're more than willing to provide a short update in person to council. I sit as the council liaison to Crest, and certainly there have been a number of initiatives which are noted here, but also Chief Mickelson has commented on that would probably be to council's advantage as we're looking to see implementation of P25 here on the peninsula in the year ahead. That might be very worthwhile for council. So I'd like to suggest, if council's interested, that we request staff put forward that request to Crest.
I think it's an excellent idea. In a report from Chief Mickelson, it indicated that there will be a room dedicated to Crest services, which I think is great that our community is providing that support. And I think once perhaps that's installed, perhaps we could have an update from Crest. I don't think we have a month for that installation, do we, at this time?
So we'll make sure that it's all sort of installed and ready prior to the presentation. I'll get a status update from the chief on it, but it's my understanding that that work is taking place right now with the completion of the CSB. So hopefully within 3-4 weeks, it should be up and operating.
Great.
Okay.
Any other comments from? I see nods. That's great. Thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor O'Toole. And now I'll call the question. All those in favour? And that motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move to the second piece of correspondence, a report on the Great Green Team event in Sydney.
I move that we receive for information.
Second.
Any discussion or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favour? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now move to bylaws. We have bylaw number 2172, the financial plan bylaw, 2019 to 2022, and a staff report dated April 2nd, 2019. Councillor Duncan?
So did we move up the letter 16.6 up to 13C, or did we put that in a different section of the agenda?
We moved it to new business. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. And so if we could have a motion regarding our important financial plan?
I'll move introduction.
Second?
Discussion, call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Unanimous.
I'll move second reading.
Second?
Discussion, call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Move third reading.
Second?
Discussion, call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll now move to development variance permit application number DV100275, which is at 2396 Amelia Avenue, to allow for a new roof and decorative columns to be constructed on an existing legal non-conforming portion of a residence which projects into the front yard setback area. And I think as of this afternoon, we have 11 submissions, 12 submissions altogether, positive in favor of the project.
I'll move the recommendation that the application be approved, subject to conditions as per council resolution number 2019.17.170.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Duncan.
I just wanted to note that this was probably a really great application in that we received a lot of letters about it and everyone was really happy, and this would probably be, if somebody's thinking of redeveloping their property, to kind of take note of what they did here to make their neighbors happy.
Yes, kudos to the proponent for taking initiative to engage their neighbors. I'll call the question now. All those in favor? And the motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 15, new business, and that's item that was moved 16.6. Councillor Duncan?
Scrolling down to get to it here. So we received a letter from the District of Highlands, which is a very busy group of people who write us a lot of letters. And they have initiated, for fun, a local government survivor climate challenge, which means they have invited, I think, every council on Vancouver Island. All of the AVIC local governments, so Vancouver Island and the coastal communities, to participate for fun. And what we would do is we would use a footprint calculator. They provided us the standard one that everyone's going to use. We would input our data into that, measure our footprints, and then we would aggregate it anonymously so that nobody knows which one of us was really awful. And every council comes up with an average. At the start of the competition, which starts on Earth Day, all of the councils would then compete to see who had the lowest overall average footprint to start, who improved the most between this Earth Day and next Earth Day, which is April 22nd. So the contest would end on April 22nd, 2020. And I think who had the final lowest number. And they thought this would be kind of a great way to show that governments were going to start putting their money where their mouth is, or their own actions where their mouth is. So I'd wanted to bring this up to see what our council thought about that and whether we were going to move to join them.
Councillor O'Keefe.
I think it's a good idea. How much data what sorts of things do we have to collect or monitor?
I took a look at it. It looks like they look primarily at your form of transportation, how often you estimate how far you drive in a year, flights. Local food actually is a big part of the calculator, is actually what your diet is, how often you eat meat and how often you choose to eat local and things like that. So it's got a few little knobs that you go through, and at the end it spits out what your carbon footprint is, how many tons of carbon your lifestyle emits, how many Earths it would take if everybody on Earth lived like you, and the number of hectares of land it takes to provide for you. So kind of sobering stats. I remember doing one a couple years ago, and I think mine was at that time 2.3, and now I've had 2 kids. So if I put that in there, that probably, yeah, it's pretty sobering.
How would the data be aggregated? Would we send it to you, or?
Well, you know what? That's what she doesn't put in the letter. So I thought about that on the way here. And I guess probably the only way that it would stay anonymous is if we maybe all write it down on slips of paper and stick it in a hat. Right? And then, and then we'll just get somebody to enter it. I can enter it. We'll make Paula do it.
Steph,
Yeah.
I think we can reveal it to staff.
I'd be happy to try.
Are you okay
Now,
with letting
my-
staff know what your carbon footprint is?
My understanding, Councillor Duncan, is that at the Mayor and Councillors Conference in Powell River this weekend, there will be some time devoted to comparing council results amongst councils.
Yes, I believe the mayor of the Highlands is going to present on it, and I asked them so far, or at least Ann Baird at the Intermunicipal Task Force, how many people had signed on, and so far they have 15 councils and counting. So.
Okay, so if we could get our information to staff midweek, and stay tuned for our carbon footprint.
All right. And so
They'll just come in with numbers.
So then the second part of that, I thought if council wanted to do this, I thought we would then extend the challenge, as they have suggested we could do, out to the public. And I thought that perhaps we would extend it to the Sydney Community Association to see if, as a group, they could beat us. And I've also run it by and said it could be done, that we could perhaps put something up on the town website and allow people in public to also compete with us to sign up. There would be some staff time involved, so we'd have to decide how much staff time we meant. It was about a half a day of staff time, if we thought that would be something that we wanted to do.
Okay, a thought is given that we're working the bugs out of completing this as a council, perhaps we can do that and see how it goes at AVICC and come back and perhaps launch something for the community.
All right. And maybe Sydney Community Association can get back to it faster, and that segment of the community could be on top of that first. See them sitting there in the back. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Duncan. And I would now ask for a motion with regards to correspondence for information.
Sorry, 15A,
15. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Wainwright.
thank you.
Councillor Wainwright brought a motion of notice of motion forward for discussion this evening on the conversion of the town's light-duty fleet to electric vehicles. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't normally do a lot of whereases with motions, but in this case, I'm going to read through them. So whereas on February 14th, 2019, the CRD board unanimously voted to declare a climate change emergency. Sydney's OCP states, section 14.4.1, the town will endeavor to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the community as a whole by 15% below 2007 levels by the year 2020, 30% below 2007 levels by the year 2030, and 80% below 2007 levels by the year 2050. 14.4.2, the town will endeavor to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from its own corporate operations in an effort to reach and maintain a state of carbon neutrality. 14.4.3, the town will work to achieve the reduction targets by implementing the policies and actions contained within the town's climate action plan. Sydney's 2010 climate action plan established greenhouse gas reduction targets for corporate operations 15% below 2009 by 2015 and 20% below 2009 by 2020. 2009 greenhouse gas emissions, corporate emissions, were 343 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Sydney's 2010 climate action plan estimated 221 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions due to our fleet of vehicles out of 343 tons from corporate operations, which is 64.4%. Sydney's 2010 Climate Action Plan on page 17 advocates that the town lead by example with town operations. In 2017, Sydney reported greenhouse gas emissions from corporate operations as 311.25 tons of CO2 equivalent, a reduction of 9.25%. Sydney's corporate greenhouse gas emissions were reported as carbon neutral due to reductions in offsets from household organic waste composting. There are now several Canadian and American manufacturers of EV pickup trucks, buses, and medium-duty trucks, and Central Saanich has resolved to convert its light-duty fleet of vehicles to electric in 2019. North Saanich currently has 3 EV vehicles in its fleet, while Sydney currently only has 1 EV vehicle in its fleet. Therefore, be it resolved that staff investigate and report to Council on the merits and options for accelerating the conversion of Sydney's light-duty fleet to electric vehicles.
Thank you. Any discussion, Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to put this in context, and actually it highlights some of the comments my colleague, Councillor Duncan, made earlier. So if you read the 2010 climate report, or climate action report, Sydney's corporate emissions are less than 1% of the community's overall emissions. In fact, it was estimated as 0.6%. So if the town and its corporate operations were to reduce our emissions by like 99%, which isn't going to happen, it would be literally a drop in the bucket for the community as a whole, and there would be absolutely no way we would meet that 15% below 2007 levels through the town's corporate actions on its own. Now, we can influence things, for example, the step code stuff, but step code would only apply to new construction, and the vast majority of buildings in the town are not new construction, and no matter what the rate of development is going to be, within the time frame that we're looking at, the majority of buildings will be the existing buildings. So the bottom line is, if we're going to have any hope of meeting that target, it's going to be the result of community action and not things that the town as a corporation is doing. So we really need to get our community members to take this to heart. And if you look at our at that climate action plan, it's saying that about 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions from our community are the result of vehicle transportation on road. Buildings only account for about 18%, and that's roughly half from residential, half from commercial. And about 17% is coming from our solid waste. And we actually have a pretty aggressive recycling and composting program. So the focus really ought to be on people having a hard look at what they're doing for transportation. But certainly, if you've got an older house which has oil heat, for example, or natural gas or propane heat, you should be looking at those incentives to allow you to convert. Anyway, that was all I wanted to say for context.
Any further discussion, Councillor O'Keefe?
Just a question, because I'm not as well versed in this as our environmental scientists. How does it get measured in the community? So if people, like you talked about, going to step code, that's something that we can measure in new buildings. But in the community, how does that get measured? If people, for example, take advantage of the BC hydro rebates that Councillor Duncan mentioned, or that they improve their insulation, or that they sell their gas-powered vehicle and move to electric. And so I'm just curious how that gets calculated and measured.
Okay, so it's actually pretty challenging to come up with hard numbers. So for example, if you look on the transportation, just the vehicle stuff, to get an accurate number, you would have to know how many kilometers each individual in Sydney drove and what the fuel consumption was for their vehicle and how much their fuel efficiency varied throughout the year. And there's no way anybody has that information. So it's a statistical aggregate. And that means, you know, it's simply an estimate. And as far as the residential and commercial building side of it goes, it's again an estimate. It's based on type of building and age of construction. But if you're looking at, if you actually want to know what the benefit of one of these upgrades on your own house goes, and in fact, it's a requirement for a lot of the rebate and grants, you actually have to get what is equivalent to step 1. They actually come and measure the efficiency of your house. So you'll have, if it's new construction, an energy advisor will work with the builder and review the plans and make suggestions. And they will measure the air exchange, you know, one of those blower in the door kind of tests. And they'll do it during construction and after construction. And if you don't meet, if you're looking for one of these rebates, they expect to see the results demonstrate that you achieved some reduction. Step 1 doesn't actually require any particular reduction. It is simply documenting what they actually built. It's steps 2 and 3 that you actually have to demonstrate some improvement over the energy use levels in the 2015 building code.
Was there a question on this side after Councillor Ventura?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support the motion and commend the direction it's headed, and I'm hopeful that the staff investigative report that's being requested, of course, would need to address the EV charging stations and give us some idea, because I don't have any in terms of the cost and infrastructure required behind those. I wonder if utilization of EV charging stations is perhaps part of metric in terms of how we see improvements in use. But also to Councillor Wainwright's point that it's really the community at large that needs to push initiatives such as this forward. I think leading by example, this is a great opportunity for the town to work its way down that path. But also longer term, as we look at our own parking requirements in the town, addressing that issue of EV charging stations and looking in the direction that we're headed will certainly be important components of understanding the infrastructure we need to have in place to make this a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
I wanted to note, from reading the climate action plan, kind of building on what Councillor Wainwright brought up about how they measure these things. I remember for the transportation stats, part of how they estimated what our emissions were was by using census data, figuring out roughly how large the workforce was. And then they looked at reported data on how many people actually went down the peninsula to work. And 50% of people actually drive down the peninsula to work. So they knew that those people were probably making 30-kilometer round trips every day, and that added into it. But they also found that roughly, and I might not get this right, 34%. And I think we also had this come out of the parking study as well. It was at least a third of the trips that were made in Sydney are actually in Sydney. Sydney is 2 square kilometers. So we know that almost, and all of the downtown is within a 10-minute walk of itself. So we know that a lot of what we can do to decrease that can actually be done fairly rapidly by encouraging active transportation modes, people being able to walk, people being able to use their scooters, cycling, and of course always trying to negotiate for better bus service. So those would be big issues, I think.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Just a question. So in terms of other metrics we might use, I'm wondering if there's, whether staff would know of things that we track that people need permits for. So for example, if people get rid of their oil tank, is that something that they're required to come to the town to get a permit or to have that inspected afterwards, and whether that's something we can track, or whether there's other sorts of things when they're doing renovations that include adding insulation or whatever, so.
Through staff, or?
Yeah, typically it's wholly dependent on whether or not a building permit's required for certain things. Certain improvements, structural changes require a building permit. Changing out your windows, for example, may not require a building permit. So, yeah, certain things we certainly can track, and but it is fundamentally dependent on whether or not a building permit is required or not.
Councillor Wainwright?
I was going to mention the province is actively, they have an inventory of community greenhouse gas emissions, and it looks like they're constantly working on trying to come up with better estimates. But the 2007 target or benchmark that we're basing it on, there was a particular methodology used. So if we were to change our metrics from that, then there's going to be some question whether you really do or don't hit the target and so on. And I would encourage us not to put a lot of effort into that, because we should be putting the effort into encouraging people to reduce their emissions, not spending a huge amount of effort trying to figure out what's the right way of crunching the numbers.
Councillor Keith?
I guess I was getting, my point was also, what is it that we're measuring in the community? So whatever that was in 2007, is that common knowledge in the community that these are the things that we were measured on in 2007? What are those things that are being measured, and how would we? So if people know what we're measuring, then they can make a better contribution.
Councillor Wainwright?
So there's a website that has some documents on how the Community Energy Efficiency Initiative, CEEI, and they have all their documentation on how they did those estimates and how they're changing them over time. And it's not at the kind of level of detail where you would see how your individual what you're doing is going to influence it. So that they've got number of single-family residential houses that are heated by oil, heated by natural gas, heated by electricity, and there's a number associated with those things, but they don't know, of course, what your actual heating oil consumption was in that. It's just an estimate. So, you know, again, I'd sort of, if you as an individual care, contact one of these energy advisors and get them to do an audit. It's relatively inexpensive, and you'll actually get a rebate of that fee if you wind up applying for a grant. And the energy advisor will tell you all the grants you're eligible for and tell you what you can do that will make the most difference, keeping in mind that if you make these improvements, you're actually going to be saving money on heating and electrical bills and stuff like that. So it costs you nothing to talk to them, and then you can decide where you want to go. And we should really be putting out that kind of information to the public generally, and I'm kind of hoping we might do that in a future town talk. But there's actually a bcefficiency.com website that you can go to that lists literally every rebate and incentive that's available, and you put in your community, and if you happen to be in one of the communities that has their own programs or some of these top-ups, it actually lists all of those too. and then contacts for who the energy advisors in your area are, etc. So I'll repeat that, bcefficiency.com. And we'll probably mention that in a same issue of Town Talk.
Councillor Duncan, should we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess just to then finish on the, if you really wanted to measure your own footprint and follow along without having to hire the energy advisor and do that, though I would recommend doing that. My husband and I did it when we bought our house, and we were able to bring it down, I think 30% or something on our energy consumption. So that was good. So the website will be, or the calculator we'll be using is footprintcalculator, all one word, .org.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright, for bringing the motion forward this evening and the presentation, talking about the town and the community, and the discussion and comments from councillors. I'll now call a question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 16, correspondence for information. We have 7 remaining items to be received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. We have no notices of motion and not going in camera, and I'll seek a motion for adjournment.
Adjournment.
Second.
In favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.